I'm Melody Brue with Moor Insights and Strategy, and you've joined us for an Insider Edition podcast. I am here at Adobe Max, the creative conference, and I'm joined by Matthew Purdon, who is Adobe's Senior Product Director in Adobe's Digital Media Business Unit, leading GenStudio solution. So, Matthew, need for content has just exploded right now. Adobe says that in the next 2 years it's going to go 5x. So right now, just the content in terms of personalization and the number of channels and just all of the sort of the need and the velocity of content has just exploded. And you're solving that with GenStudio. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, Melody. Yeah, so Adobe GenStudio is our integrated end-to-end solution to really solve problems that customers have with their entire content supply chain. We see the world becoming more and more hyper-personalized in types of the experiences that consumers have. And when they have those kinds of experiences, to fuel those, you need both the data and the content. We need to identify who you are, right, and then deliver the right content at the right time. If you're not able to create all that content, you're not going to be able to have those kinds of conversations with your customers. So what we're doing is we're basically tying together end-to-end workflows across our products with the power of generative AI that allows it to be easier for creatives and marketers to collaborate together and create all of that content. That way they are able to actually sort of do all of the campaigns that they would like to be able to do in order to reach those customers in those hyper-personalized experiences.
So really addressing that velocity and scale. And so you talk about the content supply chain. Obviously people know what supply chain is, but really explain like content supply chain and what that looks like for your customers.
Yeah, sure. So if you think about a large campaign, you would start with a creative brief. The brief comes in from the marketers, defining the segments that they're going to speak to, the channels, the messaging, all of that. That gets then digested by the creative teams to create all of the content. And then as that content's being created, it goes through a review and approval cycle with all of the stakeholders and eventually delivered out to the channels. So along that entire chain of experiences that the creatives and marketers are doing, collaborating and working together, there can be a lot of inefficiencies. Sometimes the assets are in different systems. There's people at different locations globally. People may be uploading and downloading assets. The way people often handle this now is they may even just tracking it through an Excel spreadsheet. And what you lose out on the metadata, you have inefficient processes and a lot of wasted time and effort. 20 to 40% of a creative's time can be lost searching for assets, chasing after people, doing all kinds of activity that's not the core creative work. So one, we believe that in the content supply chain you can gain greater efficiency across your teams. If you gain that efficiency, now you can create more content. So then you can actually have more content to deliver to more channels, more hyper-personalized experiences. And the faster it goes through, you can have faster speed to market as well, which is really important in terms of the sort of faster and more iterative cycles that we're seeing with consumers and customers and how they actually connect with a brand and the changes that are happening in real time often.
I've heard this a couple of times here at Max. You talked about sort of the macro marketing and then the agile marketing. What is GenStudio helping to solve in terms of how those two connect?
Sure. So first, macro marketing is your large campaign. Think about your Super Bowl campaign or a big back to school campaign, right? Things where you're spending a lot of money up front, you're thinking about it, you're really creating a lot of strong branded assets. So that's a macro campaign. An agile campaign, think of that as maybe some of your campaigns on social, maybe week-to-week promotional campaigns, or maybe things that are happening in regions that are sort of more or imagine that's in regions that are further out from your actual core business. So those cycles are going to be a lot faster and iterative. They have maybe less investment sometimes, as well as potentially less concern around sort of the less eyes and attention on that content. Mm-hmm. But those agile campaigns often leverage a lot of the assets from those large macro campaigns. So the way we do this, if you can get your entire teams operating in one system, then all that content that was created for those macro campaigns is available for those more agile marketing campaigns. The way we are doing this with GenStudio is think about having a repository that's searchable so you can easily find all the assets, and then templatizing those assets. We have Adobe Express for Enterprise, which is connected to Adobe Experience Manager assets. So think about that you're looking for an asset, you can find that asset, and in one click you can open it up, have access to it in a template, make the changes, and then repurpose that asset. That can save time, it can save money. And the important thing with using sort of things like templates is it allows that speed of marketing while you still have control of the brand. The creatives can lock down the key components.
Yeah.
The reason why people have not been able to do this as much is that they're worried about unlocking sort of all this creative things to people who may not have the skills and the technology. Right. But now with the power of Firefly as well, you can have people create great content. You can do it on brand and have that go out much more faster without always having to go through the high costs of your core studio and agencies.
Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed here at Max is control has really been a core theme. Control for creatives to have more control over what they're generating in terms of Firefly and all of the tools where it's not just AI generating their work, it's really them being able to put their creative work into it, and also control over brand and branding where if somebody opens something up in Express, it's not going to ruin what they've done. They're able to lock down the really core things where it's like, don't mess with that, you know? Yep. And I think that's really great. In terms of like content velocity, this is something that basically the C-suite has really been paying attention to. And why is that? Where is this like kind of demand and importance coming from right now?
I think a lot of it has to do with the costs, right? I mean, speaking to large enterprises, they could be spending anywhere from $100 to $500 million just on content creation. That's not even immediate placement, right? And think about where that cost is coming from. One is you're eating up time because it's inefficient, right? So things are taking longer. Another thing is people are recreating content because they don't have access. They don't know where that content is created. So if you're looking to, reduce costs, a 10 to 20% cost reduction on that becomes a significant amount of savings that can improve the bottom line of your company. We've been in a period where, through the high growth period, it was easy to kind of cover over some of that because you're like, well, we'll spend a little bit because, times are great, we're growing, and you could digest that. Well, now we're not. People aren't growing budgets, they aren't growing teams, so they need to, yet the needs and the demand for the hyper-personalization is continuing. So they now need to say, okay, I need to double, quadruple my output without increasing my costs. So now how do I gain those efficiencies? And that's why it's starting to become a conversation in the C-suite.
Interesting. So when people are looking at that and they're saying, well, now I need to quadruple, maybe even 5x my output, why Adobe? I mean, I know you're Adobe, so you're going to tell me why Adobe, but really,
why Adobe? Well, the truth is this is an area we've cared about for a long time, right? We have an incredible suite of products that are utilized by many of the largest enterprises, in the world, both on the marketing side and the creative side. And they've long sort of talked to us in our relationship with customers, like, can you make this work better together? Right? And so what we have been investing is in integrations between the products, right? So whether it's the accessing AEM assets through Workfront or in Express, or the Workfront plugin that we have in Creative Cloud, all these things are streamlining the product experience that removes a lot of the inefficiencies. But the other thing is we also have all this data analytics, whether you're talking about Adobe Analytics and our real-time customer data profiles, right? Think about that, right? So now we can actually start to track the content efficiency tied to actual creative decisions that are made way upstream, right? And not just talking about a final asset, but actually the components, creative components such as headlines or images or text that are part of that. So I don't think there's anybody in the world who can basically connect not just the workflows, but the data with the impact, and you can then get to a true MROI around what your content's doing, which will over time optimize and create better performance.
And there's probably not a creative in the world, I would assume, that doesn't use at least one Adobe product.
Probably, right? Probably at this point, right?
That's my guess.
Yeah, most creatives use an Adobe product. But I think the other thing is with Adobe Express, what we're also doing is we are basically empowering lots of people who may not have had the traditional skills and tech, to utilize some of our more pro tools to be able to sort of have their imaginations come to life, right? And so we think that all human beings are creative, and we want to empower the tools and technology for everybody to sort of realize their imagination. I would say that all people are creative, and we're finding more ways for everybody to unlock their creativity with what we offer.
There certainly are a lot of creative people here. It's pretty amazing. But let's talk about that. How does Adobe's ecosystem play into the content supply chain?
Sure. Well, the ecosystem that we've created is to bring together the marketers and the creatives and empower marketers on creating content. And so you can be using a Photoshop with one of our pro tools or Illustrator, right? You can create those as templates. Those templates can then be added to Express and accessed by these marketers to create content. And so we have an entire ecosystem there. The other thing is Firefly, right? Generative AI. Right, we have one of the most powerful image models. We also just announced the release of our vector model and our design model, and so we're building out what we think is the largest suite of basically creative models for generative AI that'll be available in the world, and we're building those into the actual workflows of the tool. So whether you're a designer, an illustrator, a videographer, right, you can access those creative generative AI tools as part of your workflow. It's not separate. It's just think about you're doing it alongside, because that's where the human part comes in, right? You have an idea, you take out some of the drudgery by creating it maybe a little faster and not doing some of the work, particularly if you talk about what we do with generative fill and the ability to just highlight a small part of the image and just have something removed or added. That would have taken hours. That's now part of the creative's workflow. Right? And then some of those same capabilities are made available in something like Express, right? And so the entire ecosystem of the way the generative AI works with the pro tools and the more democratized tool like Express, the entire thing is integrated together as an ecosystem and then tied to assets so that those assets can then be easily accessed and modified even by marketers from within some of our marketing tools.
And so with generative AI, so GenStudio is, from what I've been told, is Gen was sort of part of the naming because of generative AI. You have a lot of plans for generative AI across your whole portfolio. So tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, there's probably some things you can't tell me, but
right, sure.
Let's talk more about that.
Well, I mean, first off, we want specific models, as I've talked about, for each of the different kinds of categories we have. So an image model, we have the vector model. We've announced that we're working on video and 3D models as well.
It's very exciting.
But then we're looking at how do we extend these models for brands. So brand control is so important. You don't want people to go off and just create stuff that is totally off brand, right? So how do we empower within security and data privacy our brands to then train models that are proprietary to them that they can use and extend our model for their campaigns, for their brands, right? And so I think that's the other thing that we've just started working on with some of our customers that we're very excited about as well. And then other ways that we can think about is how do we extend not just the models themselves, but some of the workflows, right? So we're integrating into our tools, but there could be some areas where some of these capability might be needed within a workflow that's outside of our tools. Is there a way we can bring that into those workflows so that you can access it? And we want to just remove every single little sort of friction that's in the process.
I'd like to see it be able to tell me what tool I should use for whatever thing I'm needing. If I say, like, I'd like to create X, and it says, go to this and use
totally.
this.
Well, I mean, you may not even need to go to the tool in the future, because the way we see it is that, basically we as human beings are conversation. If you think about we've had to teach ourselves how to use a computer, but maybe in the future the computer is more conversation with us, and so we describe what we want, and it's creating the things that we need in conversation with us, where the needs of specific UIs may not be as needed in the same way for sort of yourself, right?
So you sort of hinted at what's next with some models for various things like video, but what should we be expecting? I mean, AI is sort of changing so quickly, and you guys have even changed so quickly. I mean, we now have seen Firefly 2, which is a massive improvement even from not even a year ago from what we saw at Summit. What should we expect to see next time?
Yeah, well, I think we're just getting started. All right, so you'll see our family of models continue to expand. You'll see new variations on the model extensions I've talked about, and these sort of integrations. But then also in Adobe GenStudio, you'll see more integrations between our products as well. You'll see more investment in the data behind it that drives it, whether it's campaign data or asset data or performance data, how all that data matters. Because generative AI also, think about there's also stuff we're doing around copy and text, not just imaging, right. And then AI as a tool itself, right? If once this system is connected, and one thing we encourage our customers is by connecting these systems and investing now in the metadata that's underpinning all this, will allow AI to also start to understand your workflows, understand what's happening, and develop new insights that create greater efficiency. So by creating a system that all of your marketers and creatives are in, it's creating that data that can be utilized, and that's what gets us really excited. But there's some possibilities we don't even know what's going to happen. But if everything's disconnected and not there, right? Your AI is only as good as the data that's available to it. And so if it's disconnected, nothing, you're not going to get the visibility. You're not going to be able to leverage what's actually there that you're creating all the time. Just get it into a system, and then I think we'll be sort of wowing all of our customers with sort of the insights that just might come up automatically. And maybe one day, I think that as we trust some of this and provide more guidelines and controls around it, some of the optimization might happen just right there on the edge, where you're getting new performances and creativity, just by sort of the systems working within the controls you put in place.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I will look forward to next year. We can revisit this conversation,
that would be a lot
and
of
we
fun.
can see exactly where we are then. My guess is we'll be even farther beyond where you think we could be by then.
We might all be surprised.
Yeah. Well,
thanks,
thank
Melody.
you so much for joining us. And this is, again, Melody Brue from Moor Insights and Strategy, and this is the Insider Podcast, and we are at Adobe Max, the creative conference. Thanks for joining us, and if you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you at the next one.